Tour the cruise ports, Egypt. Table of contents.
All about Egypt, with visiting and touring information, geography, history, attractions, and author points of interest.
Dr. Sydney Soclof. drsydney22@gmail.com. 2022. Narration by Dr. Sydney Soclof.
Zoe Phonemes.
And Nathan Koltov. For a more complete discussion of YouTube navigation, please go to this video using the link here. Egypt.
Egypt, land of the Pharaohs, and gift of the Nile.
The Arab Republic of Egypt.
Egypt is widely regarded as an important political and cultural nation of the Middle East.
Egypt possesses one of the most developed economies in the Middle East, with sectors such as tourism, agriculture, industry and service.
Where's Egypt?
Egypt is a country located in the eastern Mediterranean in North Africa.
A small part of Egypt, east of the Suez Canal, and the region commonly known as the Sinai Peninsula, lies in Southwest Asia.
Therefore, Egypt is a transcontinental country, and is considered to be a major power in North Africa, the Mediterranean region, the African continent, and the Islamic world.
This shows Egypt in relation to other countries in the Middle East, and in particular, Israel and Turkey.
Covering an area of about 1 million square kilometers, 390,000 square miles, Egypt is bordered by the Mediterranean Sea to the north, the Gaza Strip and Israel to the northeast, the Red Sea to the east, Sudan to the south and Libya to the west.
Egypt is one of the most populous countries in Africa and the Middle East. The great majority of its 80 million people live near the banks of the Nile River, where the only arable agricultural land is found.
Egypt occupies a crossroads between Africa, Europe, and Asia. The majority of its land is in the arid western Sahara Desert and the eastern Arabian Desert, separated by the country's dominant feature, the Nile River.
The large areas of the Sahara Desert and the Sinai Peninsula are sparsely inhabited.
About half of Egypt's residents live in urban areas, with the majority spread across the densely populated centers of Greater Cairo, Alexandria and other major cities in the Nile Delta.
Here is the population density of Egypt. Here we see the great density of population concentrated along the narrow strip of the Nile, and in the Nile Delta region. The rest of the country is virtually unpopulated.
This shows the largest metropolitan areas of Egypt. We see the high populated areas of the Cairo-Giza area and the Alexandria region, together with some areas in the Nile Delta.
We also note the cities along the Suez Canal, such as Port Said on the Mediterranean coast, Ismailia in the middle, and Suez at the Red Sea end of the canal.
The Nile River is the heart and soul of Egypt.
The ancient Greek historian Herodotus called Egypt the gift of the Nile. Indeed, the country's rich agricultural productivity, it is one of the region's major food producers, has long supported a large rural population working the land.
The largest rivers that flow into the Mediterranean Sea are the Po, Rhone, Ebro, and Nile. The Nile is one of very few major northward flowing rivers in the world.
The Nile River is the longest river in the world. with a length of 4,180 miles or 6,700 kilometers. With the Amazon River in South America is a very close second.
The two great tributaries of the Nile are the White Nile, starting in equatorial East Africa, and the Blue Nile, beginning in Ethiopia.
The Nile forms a flat-bottomed valley that fans out into the densely populated delta lowlands north of Cairo.
The Nile Valley, in Upper Egypt, and Delta, Lower Egypt, along with scattered oases, support all of Egypt's agriculture, and have virtually all of its population.
Here is the Nile and Nile Delta showing Cairo on the Nile, at the southern edge of the delta, and Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, at the western extremity of the delta.
Chapter 4. The Nile Delta.
Here again is the Lower Nile and Nile Delta. We see that almost all of the area with vegetation is very close to the Nile, or in the Nile Delta. About half of Egypt's 80 million people live in the Nile Delta region.
Tourism has traditionally provided an enormous portion of foreign exchange, but that industry has been subject to fluctuations during times of political and civil unrest in the region.
The Nile Delta, and all river deltas, gets their name from their fan shape, which resembles the shape of the Greek letter delta.
As many as 7 branches of the Nile once flowed through the delta, but its waters are now concentrated into the Damietta branch to the east, and the Rosetta branch to the west.
The Nile floods annually, leaving rich layers of silt called alluvium. Though totally flat apart from an occasional mound projecting through the alluvium, the delta is far from featureless.
The delta is crisscrossed by a maze of canals and drainage channels which collect the floodwaters. Much of the delta coast is taken up by brackish lagoons.
Irrigation makes possible the raising of 2 or 3 crops a year.
Located in the delta east of the Nile, the biblical land of Goshen is named in the Bible as the place in Egypt given to the Hebrews by the Pharaoh in the time of Joseph, and the land from which they later left Egypt at the time of the Exodus.
The cultivated portion of the Nile Valley between Cairo and Aswan varies from 5 to 10 miles, 8 to 16 kilometers, in width. Although there are places where it narrows to a few hundred yards, and others where it broadens to 14 miles, 23 kilometers.
Almost all of the historical sites and points of interest in Egypt are close to the Nile River.
Away from the Nile, the rest of Egypt is virtually an unpopulated desert.
Chapter 5. The Aswan High Dam.
For many centuries, people in Egypt suffered from either too little or too much water. Some years there would be drought, and there was not enough water to grow the crops or for everyday life.
Other years there was so much water that the Great Nile River would flood, destroying the crops and washing away the fertile land.
The people needed to find a way to manage the water, so they had just the right amount all the time.
The answer to these problems was the dam. The dam would need to do 3 things: control the floods of the Nile River, store the water from the floods so that it could be released at a slower rate, and generate hydroelectric power.
The Aswan High Dam was completed in 1970. The dam, located about 13 kilometers south of the Egyptian city of Aswan, was named after the city.
The Soviets helped the people of Egypt to design and build the Granite Dam, which is 3.26 kilometers, 2.3 miles, in length, and rises 111 meters, 364 feet, above the Nile River base.
The Soviets also provided the hydroelectric equipment used in the power station. It took 10 years to build the dam, at a cost of $1 billion.
Here are the major ways the dam has been beneficial. Provides a constant source of water to the people of Egypt. Helps control the flooding of the Nile River. Allows for several crops to be grown in a year. Instead of just one crop, hydroelectric equipment produces about half of all Egypt's electric power. Allows more of the land around the Nile River to be established for crop growing.
Egypt's agricultural income increased by 200%. Creates Lake Nasser, one of the largest artificially made freshwater lakes in the world. It averages 9.6 kilometers, 6 miles, wide, and extends upstream 499 kilometers, 310 miles. Develops the fertilizer and metal industries, and provides jobs and income, makes travel between Sudan and Egypt easier, and increases tourism along the Nile River and throughout Egypt.
Lake Nasser averages 6 miles, 9.6 kilometers, wide, and extends upstream 310 miles, 499 kilometers, from the dam.
The lake is named in honor of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, and provides for recreation and a greater fishing industry in the inland regions.
Here are the major detrimental consequences of the dam. Many archaeological sites had to be moved. This cost over $40 million. The pressure of the extra water has caused seepage to the surrounding dry land and increased the potential for earthquakes. About 11% of the water in the dam is lost to evaporation. Some disease in the water due to animals and people.
The dam stops the flow of sand and silt, so the water downstream carries less nutrients and less sand. Artificial fertilizers now must be used to add nutrients to the soil. The water downstream from the dam flows more slowly, so there is greater growth of phytoplankton, and the water used for drinking has to be treated with greater amounts of chlorine.
Since there is less water going downstream from the dam, salt from the Mediterranean Sea has crept slowly inland, making the soil and groundwater saltier than normal. This is harmful to the soil and drinking water, making it unfit to use for growing crops and for drinking and irrigation.
If the dam should break, millions of people downstream would be killed, and the land would again be flooded.
Despite the many problems and concerns caused by the dam, most people feel it has been a great success and has helped the Egyptian economy.
There is still much room for improvement, and hopefully new technologies will be implemented to make the Aswan High Dam and the Nile River beneficial for all.
Chapter 6. The Sinai Peninsula.
The Sinai Peninsula comprises a wedge-shaped block of territory with its base along the Mediterranean Sea coast, and its apex bounded by the Gulfs of Suez and Aqaba.
The Sinai Peninsula is the only part of Egyptian territory located in Asia, as opposed to Africa, effectively serving as a land bridge between two continents.
The southern portion of the Sinai Peninsula consists of rugged, sharply serrated mountains. These reach elevations of more than 8,000 feet, 2,400 meters.
Mount Sinai is called in Egyptian, Arabic Jabal Musa, meaning Moses Mountain, or Mount Moses. In Hebrew it is Har Sinai, and is also known as Mount Horeb.
It is the mountain in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt that is the traditional and most accepted identification of the biblical Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai is mentioned many times in the book of Exodus in the Bible and in the Quran. According to Jewish, Christian and Islamic tradition, The biblical Mount Sinai was the place where Moses received the Ten Commandments.
Adjacent to Mount Sinai is Mount Catherine, Jabal al-Katrina, Egypt's highest mountain, which has an elevation of 8,700 feet, 2,640 meters.
Eqypt Sights.
Chapter 8. Alexandria.
Lying northwest of the Nile Delta, Alexandria is the largest port in the Arab Republic of Egypt, and one of the major summer resorts on the Mediterranean Sea.
Alexandria, with a population of 4.1 million, is the second largest city in Egypt, and is the country's largest seaport. Alexandria is also an important tourist resort.
Founded by Alexander the Great in 332 BC, Alexandria is the shining pearl of the Mediterranean.
Immortalizing Alexander's name, the city flourished beyond all expectations into a prominent cultural, intellectual and economic metropolis.
Alexandria was the renowned capital of the Ptolemies and the setting of the thrilling drama involving Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony and Octavius.
Alexandria extends about 32 kilometers, 20 miles, along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. Alexandria is the largest city lying directly on the Mediterranean coast.
As Egypt's largest seaport, Alexandria handles 80% of Egypt's imports and exports. Natural gas and oil pipelines from Suez make it an important industrial center.
Alexandria also attracts many tourists.
Alexandria is home to the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a new library which replaced the astonishingly important library of Cleopatra's time, which housed every important document in the ancient world.
In ancient times, Alexandria was also an important trading post between Europe and Asia, because it profited from the easy overland connection between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea.
In ancient times, Alexandria was one of the most famous cities in the world.
This showed that two harbors of Alexandria and the Pharos Island, once the site of the famous lighthouse of Alexandria.
Here is a map of ancient Alexandria from around 100 BC to 180. Note the lighthouse on the island of Pharos, the library and museum, and the large Jewish quarter of the city.
Alexandria was founded around a then small town, around 331 BC, by Alexander the Great.
Alexandria remained Egypt's capital for nearly 1,000 years, until the Muslim conquest of Egypt in 641 AD, when a new capital was founded at Fustat, which later became part of Cairo.
From the late 19th century, Alexandria became a major center of the international shipping industry, and one of the most important trading centers in the world.
This was because it profited from the easy overland connection between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and also the lucrative trade in Egyptian cotton.
Alexandria grew in less than a generation to be larger than Carthage in a century. Alexandria had become the largest city in the world.
And, for some centuries, was second only to Rome. It became Egypt's main Greek city, with Greek people from diverse backgrounds.
The Great Library of Alexandria was by far the largest and most renowned library in the ancient world.
The ancient library had 500,000 volumes,
and served as an ancient forerunner of today's think tanks and research institutes. It was here that Euclid invented geometry.
The ancient library of Alexandria flourished under the patronage of the Ptolemaic dynasty.
and functioned as a major center of scholarship, at least until the time of Rome's conquest of Egypt, and probably for many centuries thereafter.
Chapter 10. The Pharos of Alexandria.
Alexandria was known because of its lighthouse Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Its library, the largest library in the ancient world, and the catacombs of Qalm el-Shaqafa, one of the 7 wonders of the Middle Ages.
In the ancient world there once stood a 500-foot Pharos lighthouse on an island in the harbor of Alexandria.
Built in 290 BC, one could easily notice it when approaching the famous Alexandria harbor. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world.
The purpose of the lighthouse, Pharos of Alexandria, was to guide sailors into the port.
With a height variously estimated at somewhere between 393 and 450 feet, 120 and 140 meters, it was for many centuries among the tallest man-made structures on Earth.
There was a small island off of the city's coast called Pharos. It is said that Pharos is a variation of Pharaoh's Island.
The island was connected to mainland through the means of a dike, which gave the city a double harbor. Because of flat coastline and dangerous sailing conditions, that's why a lighthouse on coast was needed.
This great lighthouse is located on the ancient island of Pharos. Now it is within the city of Alexandria.
After the death of Alexander the Great, his commander Ptolemy Soter gained the power in Egypt, and he established his capital in Alexandria.
This shows part of the coastline and some of the points of interest, such as the Fort Eqypt, the Greco-Roman Museum, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, and the Mustafa Kemal Necropolis.
Alexandria is home to the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, the new library of Alexandria. The Bibliotheca Alexandrina is a major library and cultural center, located on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea.
The Bibliotheca Alexandrina is trilingual, containing books in Arabic, English and French.
The library has shelf space for 8 million books, with the main reading room on 11 cascading levels.
The new library is both a commemoration of the Library of Alexandria that was lost in antiquity, and an attempt to rekindle something of the brilliance that this earlier center of study and erudition represented.
The library complex was officially opened in 2002.
Located near the site of the ancient Library of Alexandria, this modern version is an 11-story, cylindrical-shaped building that houses more than 8 million books.
Alexandria was not only a center of Hellenism, but was also home to the largest Jewish community in the world. The Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, was produced there.
Chapter 12. Alexandria Places of Interest.
These are some places of interest in Alexandria. 1. Fort Eqypt was built on the foundations of one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Pharos Lighthouse. Completed in 1480, the fort was expanded by Muhammad Ali in the 19th century.
2. The Mosque of Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi is the city's largest mosque, and is dedicated to the patron saint of Alexandria's fishermen and sailors. 3. The Roman amphitheater is the only example of a Roman theater to be found in Egypt.
4. The Greco-Roman Museum with displays of the Greek and Roman heritage. 5. Pompey's pillar is 84 feet high and made from Aswan rose granite, and was dedicated in 297 AD to Emperor Diocletian. This site is located south of the main city.
6. The catacombs of Qom el-Shaqafah are located close to Pompey's Pillar and date back to the 2nd century AD.
Fort Eqypt was built on the foundations of one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Pharos Lighthouse.
Fort Eqypt was built by the Mamluk ruler of Egypt, Eqypt, between 1468 and 1496.
Fort Eqypt stands approximately on the spot where the great lighthouse of Alexandria once rose, and probably incorporates some of the stones from it.
The Mosque of Abu al-Abbas al-Mursi is the city's largest mosque.
The Roman amphitheater is the only example of a Roman theater to be found in Egypt.
Built in the 2nd century AD, this Roman amphitheater has 13 semicircular tires made of white and gray marble.
The Greco-Roman Museum was created in 1892 and has displays of ancient times honoring the Greek and Roman heritage.
The Greco-Roman Museum has 21 rooms of mosaics, glass, coins, sculptures, a mummified crocodile, human mummies, the bust of a Roman emperor and a Ptolemaic mural.
Pompey's Pillar is one of the best-known ancient monuments still standing in Alexandria today. It is located on Alexandria's ancient Acropolis, and was originally part of a temple colonnade.
Pompey's Pillar is a granite column that was constructed in honor of the Emperor Diocletian in 297 AD.
Pompey's Pillar is made from Aswan rose granite and is 25 meters, or 75 feet high.
The catacombs of Qom el-Shaqafah, meaning mound of shards or potsherds, is a historical archaeological site and is considered one of the 7 wonders of the Middle Ages.
The catacombs of Qom el-Shaqafah date back to the 2nd century AD and held some 300 tombs. It contains a maze of subterranean galleries and some 40,000 relics.
The catacombs date from the Roman period and were allegedly discovered accidentally when a donkey fell into one of the underground tunnels.
The King Farouk Palace was the summer home of controversial King Farouk, who assumed power at the age of 16 in 1936.
The Alexandria National Museum has more than 1,800 archaeological pieces exhibited chronologically, from one floor to the next.
The basement is devoted to prehistoric and pharaonic times, the first floor to the Greco-Roman period,
and the second floor to the Coptic and Islamic era, that highlights artifacts raised during recent underwater excavations.
Deir Marmina, or the Monastery of Saint Amina, is a Coptic Orthodox monastery located in the desert near Alexandria.
Chapter 14. Cairo.
As the capital of Egypt, Cairo is the largest city in North Africa and of the entire Arab world.
Nicknamed the City of 1,000 Minarets for its preponderance of Islamic architecture, Cairo has long been a center of the region's political and cultural life.
Even before Cairo was established in the 10th century, the land composing the present-day city was the site of national capitals, whose remnants remain visible in parts of Old Cairo.
Cairo is also associated with ancient Egypt due to its proximity to the Great Sphinx and the pyramids in adjacent Giza.
Egyptians today often refer to Cairo as Medhasur, the Egyptian Arabic name for Egypt itself, emphasizing the city's continued role in Egyptian influence.
Cairo has the oldest and largest film and music industries in the Arab world, as well as the world's second oldest institution of higher learning, Al-Azhar University.
Many international media, businesses, and organizations have regional headquarters in the city, and the Arab League has been based in Cairo for most of its existence.
With a population of 6.8 million spread over 214 square kilometers, 83 square miles, Cairo is by far the largest city in Egypt.
With an additional 10 million inhabitants just outside the city, Cairo resides at the center of the largest metropolitan area in Africa, and the 11th largest urban area in the world.
Cairo, like many large cities in developing countries, suffers from high levels of pollution and traffic.
But its metro, currently the only one on the African continent, also ranks among the 15 busiest in the world, with over 700 million passenger rides annually.
Tahrir Square, or Liberation Square, also known as Martyr Square, is a major public town square in downtown Cairo. The square was a focal point for the Egyptian Revolution of 2011.
Al-Azhar University, founded in 970 to 972, is the chief center of Arabic literature and Sunni Islamic learning in the world, and the world's second oldest surviving degree-granting university.
The university's mission includes the propagation of Islamic religion and culture.
To this end, its Islamic scholars render edicts, called fatwas, on disputes submitted to them from all over the Sunni Islamic world, regarding proper conduct for Muslim individuals or societies.
Now we will look at some points of interest in and around Cairo.
The Saladin Citadel of Cairo is a medieval Islamic fortification in Cairo. It is on Moqattam Hill near the center of Cairo.
The Saladin Citadel was once famous for its fresh breeze and grand views of the city. It is now a preserved historic site, with mosques and museums.
The citadel was fortified by the Ayyubid ruler Saladin, or Saladin, between 1176 and 1183 AD, to protect it from the Crusaders.
The Mosque of Muhammad Ali Pasha, or the Alabaster Mosque, is in the citadel of Cairo and commissioned by Muhammad Ali Pasha between 1830 and 1848.
The Egyptian Museum of Antiquities has over 120,000 objects in its 107 halls. It houses the world's largest collection of pharaonic antiquities, and many treasures of King Tutankhamun.
Here is a map of the central part of Cairo, showing the location of the Egyptian Museum.
The museum's Royal Mummy Room has about 9 mummies on display. One of them is the newly discovered mummy of Queen Hatshepsut.
The gold mask of Tutankhamun, composed of 11 kilograms of solid gold, is on display at the Egyptian Museum.
Chapter 15. The Pyramids at Giza.
Egypt is famous for its ancient civilization and some of the world's most famous monuments, including the Giza Pyramid Complex and its Great Sphinx.
In Egypt, the kings and queens called pharaohs were buried in very large square pyramids built of stone.
The largest of these huge buildings is the Great Pyramid at Giza near Cairo. It was built by the pharaoh Khafre from the ancient Egyptian Old Kingdom.
The other pyramids were built by Menkaure and Khufu, both from the Old Kingdom. The ancient Greeks called it one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
Giza is on the outskirts of Cairo, about 10 miles or 16 kilometers southwest of Cairo.
Several of the Giza pyramids are counted among the largest structures ever built.
The Pyramid of Khufu at Giza is the largest Egyptian pyramid.
The Pyramid of Khufu is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still in existence.
Egyptologists believe that the Pyramid of Khufu was built as a tomb for 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh Khufu over an approximately 20-year period, concluding around 2560 BC.
Initially at 146 meters, 481 feet, the Great Pyramid was the tallest man-made structure in the world for over 3,800 years.
Originally, the Great Pyramid was covered by casing stones that formed a smooth outer surface. What is seen today is the underlying core structure.
Some of the casing stones that once covered the structure can still be seen around the base.
Here is an example of a casing stone. Upon completion, the pyramid was surfaced by white casing stone slant-faced, but flat-topped blocks of highly polished white limestone.
In 1300 AD, a massive earthquake loosened many of the outer casing stones, which were then carted away in 1356 AD to build mosques and fortresses in nearby Cairo. The stones can still be seen as parts of these structures.
The Great Sphinx of Giza is a limestone statue of a reclining or couching sphinx, a mythical creature with a lion's body and a human head, that stands on the Giza Plateau on the west bank of the Nile.
The Great Sphinx is the largest monolith statue in the world, and the oldest known monumental sculpture.
The Great Sphinx is believed to have been built by ancient Egyptians of the Old Kingdom during the reign of the pharaoh Khafra, circa 2558 to 2532 BC.
This is the Great Sphinx, as it appeared in about 1880 partly under the sand.
This is the Great Sphinx partially excavated.
Memphis was Egypt's first capital, where there are the ruins of the Temple of Ptah, the fallen colossal statue of King Ramses II, and the alabaster Sphinx of King Amenophis II.
Here is Memphis on the Nile, at the southern end of the delta, and only about 20 miles, or 30 kilometers south of Cairo.
Memphis became the capital of ancient Egypt for over 8 consecutive dynasties during the Old Kingdom.
Memphis reached a peak of prestige under the 6th dynasty as a center for the worship of Ptah, the god of creation and artworks.
The alabaster sphinx that guards the Temple of Ptah serves as a memorial of the city's former power and prestige.
The Valley of the Kings.
The Valley of the Kings, or Valley of the Gates of the Kings, is a valley in Egypt,
where tombs were constructed for the kings and powerful nobles of the New Kingdom, the 18th to the 20th dynasties of ancient Egypt. This occurred for a period of nearly 500 years from the 16th to 11th century BC.
This shows some of the ruins in the Valley of the Kings.
This is the location of the Valley of the Kings in the Theban Hills, west of the Nile.
The valley stands on the west bank of the Nile, opposite Thebes, which is modern-day Luxor.
The wadi consists of 2 valleys. East Valley, where the majority of the royal tombs situated, and West Valley.
The southern city of Luxor contains numerous ancient artifacts, such as the nearby Karnak Temple, and the Valley of the Kings.
The Karnak Temple complex, usually called Karnak, comprises a vast mix of decayed temples, chapels, pylons, and other buildings.
The Karnak Temple complex is a vast open-air museum and the largest ancient religious site in the world.
It is believed to be the second most visited historical site in Egypt, second only to the Giza pyramids near Cairo.
For centuries, Thebes was once known as the capital of the known world. In Luxor, there are 6 great temples.
The royal tombs are decorated with scenes from Egyptian mythology, and give clues to the beliefs and funerary rituals of the period.
All of the tombs seem to have been opened and robbed in antiquity, but they still give an idea of the opulence and power of the rulers of this time.
The area has been a focus of concentrated archaeological and Egyptological exploration since the end of the 18th century, and its tombs and burials continue to stimulate research and interest.
In modern times, the valley has become famous for the discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun, with its rumors of the curse of the Pharaohs, and is one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world.
In 1979, it became a World Heritage Site, along with the rest of the Theban necropolis. Exploration, excavation, and conservation continues in the valley, and a new tourist center has recently been opened.
The history of Egypt.
Two of the first human civilizations began in the Mediterranean area. Civilization first developed in Mesopotamia, beginning with Sumer in the 4th millennium BC.
Soon after, the Nile River Valley was unified under the Pharaohs, and civilization quickly spread through the Fertile Crescent in present-day Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, as part of the cradle of civilization.
Around 7000 BC, the settlement of Nile Valley started.
Egypt's heartland, the Nile River Valley and Delta, was the home of one of the principal civilizations of the ancient Middle East.
And, like Mesopotamia farther east, was the site of one of the world's earliest urban and literate societies.
Around 3000 BC, the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt were united. Successive dynasties witnessed flourishing trade, prosperity, and the development of great cultural traditions.
Writing, including hieroglyphics, was used as an instrument of state administration. This was especially important in keeping records regarding the use of irrigation of fields from the Nile and collecting taxes.
The construction of the pyramids around 2500 BC was a great engineering achievement.
Pharaonic Egypt thrived for some 3,000 years through a series of native dynasties that were interspersed with brief periods of foreign rule.
In 669 BC, Assyrians from Mesopotamia conquered and ruled Egypt.
In 525 BC there followed the conquest of Egypt by the Great Persian Empire.
Chapter 20. Alexander the Great.
To the north of Greece, in Macedon, Greek technological and organizational skill was forged with a long history of cavalry warfare.
Under Alexander the Great, this force turned east, and in a series of 3 decisive battles, routed the Persian forces and took their empire, which included Egypt and the Phoenician lands.
The major centers of the Mediterranean at the time became part of Alexander's empire as a result.
In 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and founded Alexandria. After Alexander's death, the empire quickly disintegrated, and the Middle East, Egypt, and Greece were soon again independent.
Alexander's conquests spread Greek knowledge and ideas throughout the region.
After Alexander's death, a Greek Ptolemaic dynasty ruled until 31 BC. Egypt became an integral part of the Hellenistic world, and an advanced literate society thrived in the city of Alexandria.
These eastern powers soon began to be overshadowed by those further west.
In North Africa, the former Phoenician colony of Carthage rose to dominate its surroundings with an empire that contained many of the former Phoenician holdings.
However, it was Rome that would eventually dominate the entire Mediterranean basin. spreading first through Italy. Rome defeated Carthage in the Punic Wars,
thus becoming the leading force in the region. The Romans soon spread east, taking Greece, and the Greek heritage played an important role in the Roman Empire.
By this point, the coastal trading cultures were thoroughly dominant over the inland river valleys that had once been the heart of the great powers.
Egyptian power moved from the Nile cities to the coastal ones, especially Alexandria. Mesopotamia became a fringe border region between the Roman Empire and the Persians.
In 31 BC, Queen Cleopatra committed suicide after Octavian's army defeated her forces, and Egypt came under Roman rule.
For several centuries under the Roman Empire, the Mediterranean became virtually a Roman lake, surrounded on all sides by the empire, and was called Mare Nostrum, or our sea.
The Roman Empire extended from the British Isles in the northwest to Egypt in the southeast, and from Armenia in the northeast to Mauritania, now Morocco, in the southwest.
One portion of the empire was Judea, and in time, a religion founded in that region, Christianity, spread throughout the empire and eventually became its official faith.
Egypt became part of Rome's successor state, the Byzantine Empire, until its conquest by Arab Muslim armies in 639 to 642 AD.
Temporarily, the East was again dominant, as the Byzantine Empire was formed from the eastern half of the Roman one.
Chapter 22. The Arab Conquest of Egypt.
The Arab Muslim armies conquered Egypt in 642 AD, and spread all over North Africa, and eventually into the Iberian Peninsula, conquering almost all of present-day Spain and Portugal.
Until the Muslim conquest, great continuity had typified Egyptian rural life.
The language and culture of the rural, agrarian masses, whose lives were largely measured by the annual rise and fall of the Nile River, with its annual inundation, had changed only marginally throughout the centuries.
Following the conquests, both urban and rural culture began to adopt elements of Arab culture, and an Arabic vernacular eventually replaced the Egyptian language
as the common means of spoken discourse. Moreover, since that time, Egypt's history has been part of the broader Islamic world.
And though Egyptians continued to be ruled by foreign elite, whether Arab, Kurdish, Circassian, or Turkish, the country's cultural milieu remained predominantly Arab.
Egypt eventually became one of the intellectual and cultural centers of the Arab and Islamic world, a status that was fortified in the mid-13th century when Mongol armies sacked Baghdad and ended the Abbasid Caliphate.
The Mamluk sultans of Egypt, under whom the country thrived for several centuries, established a pseudo-caliphate of dubious legitimacy.
In 969 AD, Cairo was established as capital of Egypt.
From 1250 to 1517, Mamluk, or slave soldiers, ruled Egypt, characterized by great prosperity and well-ordered civic institutions.
In 1517, the Turkish Ottoman Empire defeated the Mamluks and established control over Egypt. That lasted until 1798, when Napoleon I led a French army in a short occupation of the country.
In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte's forces invaded Egypt, but were repelled by the British and the Turks in 1801. Egypt once more became part of the Ottoman Empire.
This French occupation marked the first time a European power had conquered and occupied Egypt, and it set the stage for further European involvement.
Chapter 23. The Suez Canal.
Egypt's strategic location has always made it a hub for trade routes between Africa, Europe, and Asia. But this natural advantage was enhanced in 1869 by the opening of the Suez Canal, connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea.
With the opening of the Suez Canal, the Mediterranean resumed its importance as a link on the route to the east. The Ottoman Empire finally collapsed in the First World War, and its holdings were carved up among France and Britain.
The Suez Canal connects the Red Sea with the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It extends from Port Said in the north to the port city of Suez in the south, a distance of 100 miles, 160 kilometers.
Ships entering the canal from the south pass through the Gulf of Suez, Little Bitter Lake, Great Bitter Lake, and into the main body of the canal.
The narrow swath of green extending east-west on the west side of the canal is a strip of irrigated farmland that borders the Ismailia Canal, which connects Cairo with the Suez Canal at the city of Ismailia.
The concern of the European powers, namely France and the United Kingdom, which were major shareholders in the canal, to safeguard the canal for strategic and commercial reasons, became one of the most important factors influencing the subsequent history of Egypt.
Just before World War I, Turkey, or the Ottoman Empire, ruled what is now Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Yemen.
Turkey joined Germany and Austria in World War I, and its defeat resulted in the loss of much territory, including Egypt.
In 1882, British troops took control of Egypt, and in 1914, Egypt became a British protectorate. The United Kingdom continued to exert a strong influence on the country until after World War II.
Egypt gained independence in 1922, and Fuad I became king of Egypt.
King Farouk succeeded his father as king of Egypt in 1936.
In 1948, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, and Syria attacked the new state of Israel.
Gamal Abdul Nasser led a coup by the Free Officers Movement 1952, which resulted in Muhammad Najib becoming president and prime minister of Egypt.
In 1953, Egypt was declared a republic. In 1954, Nasser became prime minister, and later, in 1956, became president. In 1954, the evacuation treaty was signed, and the British forces finally left Egypt.
Chapter 25. Egypt-Israel Wars.
In July 1956, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal to fund the Aswan High Dam. Then in October 1956, there was the tripartite invasion of Egypt by Britain, France, and Israel due to the nationalization of the Suez Canal. A ceasefire is declared in November.
Ships which have been sunk in the entrance to the Suez Canal at Port Said blocked the canal. At extreme right is one of the naval salvage vessels already engaged in the work of clearing the channel.
In 1958, Egypt and Syria joined to form the United Arab Republic, UAR, in the first step of their aim for Arab unity. However, in 1961 Syria withdrew from the union with Egypt, but Egypt still remained known as the UAR.
Israel defeated the forces of Egypt, Jordan and Syria in the Six-Day War in June of 1967. Israel took control of Sinai, the Golan Heights, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank.
In 1970, Nasser died and was replaced by his vice president, Anwar al-Sadat. In 1971, the Treaty of Friendship between Egypt and the Soviet Union was signed, and the Aswan High Dam was completed. The dam had a huge impact on irrigation, agriculture, and industry in Egypt.
In 1973, Egypt and Syria went to war with Israel during Israel's celebration of Yom Kippur to reclaim the land they had lost in 1967. Egypt began negotiations for the return of Sinai after the war.
This shows the number of Syrian tanks left behind in an Israeli anti-tank ditch on the Golan during the Yom Kippur War.
In 1975, the Suez Canal was reopened. It had been closed since the 1967 war. In 1976, Anwar al-Sadat ended the Treaty of Friendship with the Soviet Union.
Egypt had led the Arab states in a series of wars against Israel, but was the first of those states to make peace with the Jewish state, which it did in 1979.
In 1978, the Camp David Accords for Peace with Israel were signed. In 1979, the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel was signed. Egypt was then condemned by other Arab nations and excluded from the Arab League.
In 1981, Anwar al-Sadat was assassinated by jihad members. A national referendum then approved Hosni Mubarak as the new president, and in 1989 Egypt rejoined the Arab League.
In 1999 Mubarak began his fourth term in office, and in 2005 he was re-elected for a fifth consecutive term.
The climate of Egypt.
Will it be hot? Or will it be very hot in Egypt?
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Alexandria.
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Alexandria.
Here is the average number of days with rainfall. We see a very pronounced dry season in the summer months of June through August.
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Fahrenheit throughout the year in Cairo.
Here are the average high and low temperatures in degrees Celsius throughout the year in Cairo.
We see a very pronounced dry season from May through October.
Here is the average number of rainy days throughout the year in Cairo.
The money of Egypt.
Currency exchange rates can change daily. For the latest exchange rate, click on this icon. $1 equals 19.4 Egyptian pounds. 1 Egyptian pound equals 5 US cents.
$1 equals 19.4 Egyptian pounds. 1 Egyptian pound equals 5 US cents.
This is a 50 piastres coin. 100 piastres equals 1 Egyptian pound.
This is a 50 Egyptian piastre banknote.
Recommended videos, Egypt.
Recommended video, Geography Now. Egypt.
Recommended video, Rick Steves' Egypt, Yesterday and Today.
Recommended video, 10 best places to visit in Egypt, travel video.
Recommended video, top 10 places to visit in Alexandria, Egypt, travel guide.
Table of contents.
Thanks for watching. Please watch some more of my great videos.